Hello and welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. On the show today, Jim Waterson's here. Yes, the former Guardian media correspondent speaks to us about the launch of his local journalism project, London Centric, and the wider local media revolution. Also on the programme, as most streamers embrace ads for their services, why is Amazon closing Freevee? Jane Ostler, EVP at research agency Kantar, explains. That plus Chloe Straw of Audio UK talks about the future of the medium and who's going to replace Gary Lineker on Match of the Day. Right, that's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So welcome back to the Media Club. Jane, who have you got to join our ranks this week?
My nomination is Charlotte Locke, who is Customer Director at John Lewis and Partners.
Okay.
Because today they launched their Christmas ad, which was, in some quarters eagerly awaited. And they were actually last out of the gate, like a lot of others have been released first, but it's really good. And it's got a really good song by The Verve. It covers a sort of Narnia theme. It really has a lot of characteristics that you want to see in Christmas ads, and so they should be applauded for that, I think. And Charlotte obviously runs that show, so I think it's a great ad. It's
a lot of pressure doing the John Lewis ad.
Yeah. Exactly.
We'll see how well that does. Yes, you can join. And London Centric's Jim Waterson. Who would you add to the club's roles this week?
I think the team running Bluesky, who are a tiny team running a sort of not-for-profit, I can't quite work out the ownership, that basically has recreated Twitter as it was 10 years ago when everyone was younger, healthier, and could still stay out all night. And therefore, everyone who enjoyed Twitter 10 years ago has en masse this week just decamped over there. And so it's great if you want to pretend that everyone's just a nice wet liberal who wants to be nice to each other. It's lovely.
Yes, we'll give it a couple of weeks.
The
trolls arrive. Well, we'll talk a bit more about Twitter later on. So let's kick off with news that Gary Lineker is leaving the BBC at the end of the football season. Well, sort of the BBC. He won't host this year's Sports Personality of the Year, and he's not going to be doing Match of the Day. Jim, 25 years in the chair. Which proportion of that has not been controversial?
Well, I can't quite remember when he became the sort of the Gary Lineker who intervened on politics. Wasn't it almost the fact that he was the nice guy off the telly doing the quite political tweets that sort of was so jarring about it, and why it was the Sun and everyone jumped down his throats because he was supposed to be in his box as the sports person. But I mean, I remember interviewing him about 18 months ago, and him, very much being coy about whether he'd renew, very much being coy about whether he'd been in negotiations with streamers. And, there's a lot of options out there. His contract's up at the end of the year, and it seems to be as simple as they've decided not to renew it. And there's this wider question with on-air talent of how much does the viewing public care about you anymore? And are you able to bring them with you if you go over to Sky or a commercial broadcaster? Or actually, basically, are these salaries no longer what the market will hold? And instead, you've got some influencer type model who might be making a lot more just giving their down-the-camera YouTube takes on football.
Jane, when I sort of read that statement, it did seem like the BBC didn't necessarily offer him another contract.
It was ambiguously worded,
yes. And some suggestion that he would have perhaps accepted one if it was there. I mean, he's doing all right. Goalhanger's doing really well. King of the podcast world. Does it just that 1.3 million for doing 26 Saturdays, is that the draw really?
I think that's probably part of it, and I think the big question now is what do they do with that format, because the format is fairly well known, but it's also possibly a little bit tired. And bringing in a new presenter, you probably have to change the format at the same time, because you can't recreate mini Gary. So what do you do is the question.
Jim, any runners and riders on who they might pop in?
I think the interesting briefing that was, I think, in the Times yesterday, that they might do something quite radically different was an interesting one to look at. If you're a younger football fan, how relevant is someone who played football 20, 30 years ago to you in the same way? There's lots of questions like that. So either you end up annoying your older audience who still tune in on a Saturday night. Although Match of the Day has a big audience on a Sunday morning, doesn't it? People who tune in there. So you either basically go down the sort of 5 Live Mark Chapman route and go, that's our core lot, or you go something radically different which gets everyone up in arms that might make the long-term future of the programme work. But there's a lot of work being done at BBC Sport at the moment, isn't there?
But do people just want to watch some goals? Does it matter who's in between?
Well, the implication from something I read today was that there's going to be a lot of kind of footage coverage that's used. And remember also, a lot of people do get their insider football news from various different Twitter accounts now. So to incorporate a kind of more digital element makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I'll be honest, I think if I ever see any goals from a Premier League game, and I'm a York City supporter, so it's not really that relevant. But when I do see them, they're almost always in dubiously sourced clips that someone's just filmed off the telly and put online. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but the reality is that for a lot of people, you want to see the goals, you just key it in on Twitter and someone's uploaded it. You don't have to do the classic sitcom thing of waiting all evening to see the highlights.
I think it's a broader question, obviously, rights in football. I think you can pay £700 a year to get just under half the matches. And obviously, if you're outside of the UK, you can get them more easily. Obviously, you can get it inside the UK as well on a Fire Stick, though someone was arrested and sent to jail today for selling those.
I mean, the Fire Stick thing, I'd love to know what Amazon thinks people are buying Fire Sticks for when every smart TV has most of the functions in, and yet mysteriously everyone, a lot of football fans I know have Fire Sticks that they seem very keen on keeping.
I don't know what you mean. Some news just as we were starting to record the show. InfoWars, which is the Alex Jones, very right-wing organisation, conspiracy theory led programming, has just been acquired. Everything's been up for sale because Alex has been sued by the Sandy Hook families. But it's been bought by The Onion, the satirical news website. That's quite a shocker, Jane.
I think it's quite astonishing. You couldn't make that story up. And the families of Sandy Hook victims actually agreed to forego some of their compensations so that The Onion could raise their bid, thus making them the winners. So I think it's, what they do with the assets, we'll have to see. But it's an interesting kind of counterbalance to perhaps some of the political stories we've seen in the last week or so in the US. And the coverage in The Onion is brilliant, absolutely brilliantly written. So I recommend everybody reads it.
Yes, there's a great write-up from a sort of owner at Global Tetrahedron, which is the parent company of The Onion. I mean, when you thought, Jim, that we'd seen all the digital business models, this seems another new one.
Well, The Onion, which is I think now backed by a tech millionaire and run by Ben Collins, who used to be a disinformation reporter. It's all very pleasingly meta, and I can't work out if it's sort of a nice bit of sort of millennial smugness, ha, we bought InfoWars. But one thing I will say about InfoWars is, for all the horrors of what it pushed, the reason that people locked onto it was entertaining, in the sense that Alex Jones knew how to put on an act, he knew how to play a character, and to when he was wearing a tinfoil hat on air, he knew what he was doing, even if he was also being mad at the same time.
And also it was kind of early purveyor of sort of high quality YouTube looking content that looked like a news channel. The sort of media literacy of it made it difficult if you didn't really understand. I don't
want to do some horrible horse show thing, but there is sort of, in some ways, there was always a bit in common with what The Onion were doing, parodying the mainstream news, and what InfoWars were doing, sort of flipping it completely on its head. So it's not as bad a fit. It might work quite well, especially if they applied some of their existing stuff to the brand.
Well, we might see if The Onion starts selling supplements from the InfoWars back cabinets. Meanwhile, on the more regular streamers, news that the ad-funded model is working for SVODs, that's subscription video on demand services, with new data that suggests Netflix is on course to bring 4 million onto its ad tier this year. Jane, what does this research from Barb show?
Yeah, what it shows is also an increase in the take-up of AVOD services, advertiser video on demand. So, the key thing for growth is, we all know this, to how any brand grows, is to make yourself appeal to more people, to bring in more people. So how do you do that? Radical changing of pricing tiers is one way of doing it. And I think just over a third of the UK population now uses some form of AVOD service. And that's actually the increase that's kind of sustaining all of these companies. So, it's a really interesting story. Obviously, the content that Netflix has is, constantly pushed and is very, very high profile. But I think it's the increase in the AVOD take-up that is actually getting new people onto streaming services.
I think I was listening to someone from Paramount speak, and they were saying that they make more money from the AVOD people than the SVOD people. You sort of assume that subscription ad free, that's the way
do we
forward.
have any? I mean, do we know what sort of money we're talking about with that? Because that, I mean, how much do you pay for a sub on that?
Well, I think they were saying for like the lower end, so your Paramounts and your Discoveries are sort of about $3.99, $4.99, aren't they?
Yeah, that territory, $3.99 to about $5.99 per month, which is obviously, half the price ish of maybe a proper subscription, but it is obviously succeeding in bringing in more people. Also, importantly, it's reducing churn from other services, because it's, if you might think you've oversubscribed, you've got 3 or 4 subscriptions in your monthly outgoings, if you can go to a cheaper level, it also prevents churn.
But there is one AVOD that's sort of disappearing, or sort of. This is Amazon Freevee.
Yes.
Which was IMDb TV.
Yes.
Trying to remember the legacy of all of these things. Why are they scrapping Freevee?
Yeah, it's not exactly scrapping, is it? They've kind of absorbed it like a sort of amoeba into Amazon Prime Video. I think, couple of issues going on. One was they launched it, I think, in 4 markets, including the UK, Freevee. And, if you're launching a brand and you're a very well-known brand yourself, it doesn't make sense to me to launch an entirely new name that no one's ever heard of, because the investment required to do that and sustain it is substantial. So it makes sense that it's brought in under the Prime Video brand, and then effectively becomes their ad-supported service, thus, encouraging people to subscribe to Prime Video and Prime and get free deliveries and all that kind of stuff. So it makes sense that the content has now been absorbed, and it was a bit of an odd decision to set up an entirely new brand, because it costs money to do that.
Jim, are you watching Neighbours supported by Freevee on Amazon Prime?
I think when I was a media editor at The Guardian, I wrote that story about 5 times, and now I'm a retired media correspondent. I'm blissfully unaware of what the rights issue is with Neighbours. Is this the end of it again now?
Well, I don't know. Freevee is currently paid for by Freevee, so we'll see whether it survives into Amazon Prime. What do you subscribe to? What makes it into the Waterson household?
Too much. I told my 4-year-old the other day that Daddy might have to cancel Disney Plus so we can go on holidays. And of course, the little bugger immediately shot back that we'll keep Disney Plus and not go on the holiday.
Oh wow!
And I was like, that wasn't what I meant. So there's Disney Plus, there's Netflix, which I haven't really been watching that much. And a sudden and rapidly growing number of Substacks, which is taking up most of my bucket. And that's an interesting thing, the idea of us all having a bit of a mental budget for subscriptions now. As someone who's just launched a partly paywalled outlet, encountering that and people going, "Oh, I can put this, but I've just cancelled one other thing to try you out for a few months, and I know I've really got to make it work for them for those few months, because they'd be quite happy to do that to me and move on to something else."
Yeah.
And so that's a sort of interesting mental thing that I think we're all clearly developing.
Everything subscription-wise, it all fits into the same bucket. It's cash that's going out for content.
Yeah.
I think your Spotify subscription, even like fitness subscriptions and things, fit into that too.
Yes, and it also depends how often you look at your bank account to see what actually is going out. If you remember half the things, and then if it's a good idea to do an audit every now and then. I think. Yeah.
Yes. Just before the break, The Guardian has pulled itself from X, previously Twitter. Lots of people disappear off X. Jim, you yourself disappeared off X.
When I was working at The Guardian, I disappeared for 18 months, and the worst thing was when I came back, no one had noticed in that time at all. So I think we're all incredibly replaceable. But as someone who worked there for 6 years, I can tell you that the traffic at I don't think I'm breaking any trade secrets because they said this themselves. The traffic at The Guardian did not ever in recent years come from Twitter at all. And so essentially, it was more of a headache than a help even before the Musk takeover.
Brand safety is really important, Jane, and Musk. There's a lot of issues that surround Elon Musk and X and all of his businesses. Yeah. Guardian right to take themselves off?
Well, it's kind of up to them, really. In a way, they're sort of officially coming off Twitter, but the journalists themselves, I understand, are not prevented from using it or linking to their own content. So,
or even using embedding tweets in articles.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you like Marina Hyde or something, you can still follow her on Twitter and presumably she's going to post her articles. So I'm not sure what much difference it will make, but you're right about the reputational issue for Twitter for advertisers. We did a recent piece of research which shows that it's kind of one of the least trusted platforms for advertising. Brand safety is at an all-time low, and also investing plans for next year. Marketers are not planning to increase their investment in Twitter/X next year in terms of budget. And actually, a lot of the other platforms are doing really well in increasing trust and brand safety and innovation, all of the things that Twitter is most definitely not doing for advertisers. And, that does reflect itself in the Twitter experience. Forget the content for 1 minute. What's your ad experience? And it's actually pretty shocking at the moment.
I mean, I love a Temu ad as much as the next person.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I get a lot of Temu ads.
Yeah, we all do.
I mean, Elon Musk destroyed the site, ruined a community, but gained control of the federal government in the process. So, I mean, in some ways, that 40-odd billion might have actually been quite a good investment for him.
Do you think, a lot of the tech companies, even pre-Trump's win, were starting to be very nice to Mr. Trump. Have they got to be nice to Mr. Musk now as well, in case he can fiddle with some regulations?
I don't know. I mean, in my brief, limited time in the States covering US politics, my only prediction is that the moment Musk gets more attention than Trump, he'll suddenly get very jealous and kick him out after a few months.
Already some of Trump's lackeys are leaking that he's around too much and already is being annoying, and he's getting a lot of coverage. They want him gone as much as a lot of the public, I think.
Exactly. But as I said at the top, I really think that there is a transition in the UK, at least, not in the US, but in the UK, away from Twitter to Bluesky this week. And the biggest difference for publishers and for individual journalists is that it actually is sending traffic. Whereas Twitter had throttled back external links to podcasts, blogs, and news websites so much that there wasn't even really a business case for remaining on there.
I joined Bluesky a while ago. I've started posting a bit more there. Isn't it just a sort of refuge for journalists in the same way that Mastodon is a refuge for tech fans?
Yes, but there was a tipping point this week where it suddenly felt that normal people and sort of mainstream celebrities were joining. It's definitely never going to be anything like as mainstream as Twitter. We probably won't have... maybe it wasn't a good idea to have everyone of every political persuasion, every football fan, every politics obsessive, your mum, your dad, 5 generations all crowded in one platform with one feed. Maybe that was always going to end badly. So this might just be the way it ends up now. If you want if you want news and policy analysis in the UK as of this week, I genuinely would say there's more on Bluesky than Twitter.
Jane, have you joined yet?
Not yet, no, but I've usually been a lurker on Twitter, and I have noticed this week, as you were saying, there's been a ton of kind of departure announcements. So I probably will join Bluesky just to see what's going on.
Well, if you find me on Bluesky, I think if you search my name, you'll find me. I've done a link to people who come on the Media Club who are on Bluesky. There's a little starter pack you can go to find everybody that you listen to. That's it for us for the moment. We'll be back after this. Here at the Media Club, we pride ourselves on staying up to date with the latest stories and trends, but that leaves us with less time to handle all the technical aspects of the show. That's where PodShop comes in. Their Shoreditch studio offers a reliable setup that makes it super simple to create a fast turnaround show at a high quality. From selecting the right equipment to managing the recording, PodShop takes the hassle out of podcasting so we can stay focused on what really matters, delivering great content. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned pro, PodShop ensures your podcast sounds great and helps you come across the expert that you are. And for a limited time, you can get 25% off your first booking at PodShop by using the code MEDIACLUB. That's the code MEDIACLUB at podshoponline.co.uk.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about branded shows. They've become something of a go-to for brands and their marketing teams, and rightly so. The time that listeners spend in the company of a brand is extremely valuable, but those brands are unlikely to return if nobody ends up listening to their show. To speak to us about that or anything else to do with podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
And welcome back. Here's what we've been talking about in the Media Club this week. Spotify have announced a range of new features in a star-studded event in LA. Stephen Bartlett, Meghan Trainor and Don Lemon, what a combination, were there as the platform announced podcasters can earn revenue based on how much your video podcast is streamed by its premium users. If you subscribe to Spotify, keep watching. The Daily Mail's parent company is still making good use of the European Court of Human Rights, successfully arguing this week that it shouldn't pay the other side's lawyers success fees when the publishers lose a case. Cakeism is alive and well at DMGT. And Radio 1 Anthems began streaming this week. The service is one of a number that provoked a bit of a backlash from the commercial radio sector, which is probably why the launch has focused on new talent gleaned from the Student Radio Association. Joining us is Chloe Straw from Audio UK. Chloe and Jim, cynicism aside, Radio 1's got quite a good reputation on new talent. Are you aware of what they do at Christmas with new DJs?
Yeah, they announced this week that one of their Christmas sort of trialists is getting a full-time slot, I think, and they're very good at giving people, horrible slots early on Sunday mornings for an hour to see how they work out, which... I weirdly, as I age entirely out of their supposed age bracket, have started listening more to Radio 1, which will probably be giving a heart attack at Broadcasting House. But I don't know, it feels like it's in quite a good shape at the moment. Yeah,
so Chloe, good news for new talent on air. Mm-hmm. Do they do a similar thing for new talent off air?
I think that was probably one of the slight disappointments for me. If you look at the commissioning around those slots, I think some of it went to BBC Audio, which is effectively BBC in-house, and some of it went to Audio Always, who I love, based in Salford. Audio UK members. Stu is the chair of our Out of London steering group. Big fans of them. But I think what I'd love to see is more of an opportunity for smaller independent businesses to gain a foothold in the BBC with those shows. And I think if you looked at there was a similar round for Radio 3, and I think they had kind of a more diverse set of results. And I think to see BBC Audio getting some of those programmes just felt a bit disappointing to me, if I'm honest. It felt like a bit of a missed opportunity. So hopefully in future rounds we'll see a bit more diversity in terms of the producers making.
Because I guess it's an interesting thing with BBC commissions. So what a lot of in-house is now sort of its own production company. Yeah. I mean, maybe BBC Studios could become members of Audio UK. They are an independent as well.
They're a fully owned subsidiary of the BBC, no less. So they pay the fees. Why not? Absolutely not.
Do you think they see it as in-house, even though it's sort of been created as a separate thing?
Do they see studios or BBC Audio? I think what is deeply confusing is if you look at the TV model, it's very different. And I think what happens with the audio model is you have BBC Audio, which effectively is still in-house. Right. It's the BBC's public service funded production department that still pitch for stuff. And then you have the independent sector, so the Audio Always and the Sonys and the Listens. And then you have BBC Studios, which is almost like a third segment. So in that instance, it was the BBC PSB, BBC Audio who won some of the programmes and some of the indies. As far as I know, BBC Studios are mainly focused on speech. So I think for something like that, also if you look at the budgets, would it be worth BBC Studios' while? Probably not, to be honest.
Could BBC Audio bid for something and BBC Studios bid for something?
I believe not.
Just the unique way the BBC is put together.
Yeah, if you look at the kind of regulatory way in which it is sort of regulated, that is one of the only things I would say that's regulated in terms of how it interacts, how Studios interacts. So the way that Studios interacts with the BBC PSB side is regulated as part of the charter. Unfortunately for us, the way that BBC Studios interacts with the rest of the commercial world is not regulated. So,
I mean, it's a strange time of audio. We talk about it on the show quite a lot, very always evolving. And you've got people who used to be regarded as sort of the big audio production companies, who were very much into winning BBC commissions, sort of step out of that space. We had sort of Sony, what was something else, hand back some shows, and there's been some recent shows that have been handed back as well. Why is that? What's going on there?
So primarily the shows are the music shows. So that would be Radio 1, Radio 2, 3, so on. And it is because the bottom line isn't, the thing that I'm told over and over again. There are other reasons, but the main reason is it just, a lot of these companies make a loss, which is, it helps because the contracts tend to be kind of a yearly rollover. So actually, if you're running a business, it's helpful to have that backbone.
Right. So you've got a regular show. It's not every week.
Exactly.
Even if the fee's not what you'd like, it's regular cash.
But I would say that just isn't worth it anymore because the industry is so hugely different now, and there's so many opportunities to make so much more money that actually that business model increasingly, whether you are a kind of self-made business or one that's been acquired, and it's interesting that it happens in different ways. I think some of the kind of businesses that have been acquired, obviously the new parent company looks at the bottom line and just thinks that's not worth it.
It's kind of low margin work. Let's have our teams working on something else.
And it's a shame. I mean, we talked to the BBC a lot about it, and I am hopeful that in the future somewhere there is a better solution.
I mean, they've got to panic. If you're the BBC and you think all these shows are being handed back and they're under pressure cash-wise, they've got to look at it and go, maybe we have got to raise the rates, otherwise we're not going to get people bidding for it. Or are there just always people to bid for these things?
No, I'd say there's not always. And if you think of one of the, big things about the BBC and their kind of interactions with the audience is the best ideas, the less people that bid for stuff, you're not getting the best ideas, are you? And I think that's tricky. I think that there is an understanding within the BBC that it doesn't work as it is. I think my fear would be that it would all just go back in-house because it's easier. But I think then that would be hugely do the audience a huge injustice, to be honest. So I think hopefully they can find a better solution, and the solution is to pay more. So
Jim?
My only experience of this was making a couple of shows for Radio 4 and I did it with a fast-growing indie. The first one, they were delighted to get the commission. By the 3 or 4 years later when we came back, they were like, we could have our team working on podcasts for the American market. And I was like, okay. And they basically were like, we'll keep it doing because we like working with you, Jim. But that was kind of like, I was like, wow, you this has changed in even the 3 years between two series.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big shift. The BBC very much were the only people buying this stuff. Not that long ago. And now obviously there's a lot more opportunities. What else is on Audio UK's agenda at the moment? What would you like to see happen?
So one of the big things that we're lobbying for at the moment is a podcast production tax relief. So as you've kind of said, the kind of old BBC model is not necessarily the model that exists anymore. And a lot of our companies make most of their revenue through self-publishing, through creating their own content that they monetize. And one of our big jobs is to grow the industry and to obviously bring more money in for our members, for the industry as a whole. We have been working on a podcast production tax relief for quite some time. And obviously with the new government in, we've kind of revamped our efforts on that. So we are meeting Steph Peacock next week to talk about it. I think I can say that, just said it anyway. And I'm really hopeful. So we're just kind of working on our approach to that.
Well, it's also something that's been very successful in the TV world and film world. It's brought a lot of productions and it's helped a lot of people keep their jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that I'm often challenged with is how do we, bring more global investment into the UK? How do we get more of the American dollars into the UK? It's not just about America, but I think making the UK a really attractive place to invest in is, good for everyone.
So speaking of investment, Jim, you've made your own personal investment in yourself.
Wow, that sounds like a sort of Stephen Bartlett-esque sort of self-help guru kind of thing, doesn't it?
As we've mentioned already, and as you've been on the show before, you were the media editor at The Guardian, and you've just launched London Centric, a new London news source. What made you do this?
I'd spent 6 years as media editor at The Guardian, and it was genuinely my dream job. I'd always, literally, even as a teenager, wanted to do that job. But that's how sad I was. I kind of got to do it. And one of the things I kept reporting on, which became a bit depressing, was just the rounds of redundancies at local papers, and secondly, I was, raising a young family in London. I was on shared parental leave, and I was cycling around with my, little baby, and I was just seeing that there was nothing that I really wanted to read about why London was functioning as it was. And the weird thing kind of that came to it was I was often sent out from The Guardian to do pieces on news deserts, and they often wanted somewhere, I don't know, maybe a Midlands town where the community was falling apart due to lack of local news. And those places often still had half-decent local papers, whether through luck or whatever. And then I found that London, with the standard and Evgeny Lebedev's treatment of it, allowing it to rot away in some areas. There's some great journalists still doing their best there, but in other areas really cutting back on London coverage. And it just felt that there was a moment that was happening. So really the stars aligned, and we've been talking about, I was listening to last week's episode where there was chatter, why would you want to leave Guardian Media Group if you're an Observer employee? We had a voluntary redundancy round. Not that many people put their hands up, and I said, well, okay, let's try this. So I gave myself 6 months to launch London Centric, which aims to do proper in-depth reporting on the capital using a part free, part paywalled model, currently using Substack as the underlying technology. So that means a lot of people are used to it. Also means I hand over quite a lot of the money to them. And I'll be honest, I haven't worked harder in my life. I'm having so much fun. I've broken some stories that have already been all over the nationals. And the numbers are way beyond what I could have dreamed of.
So this is londoncentric.media. I had a look on the Substack, and it said over 10,000 sign-ups to the free newsletter.
Yep.
Which is great. I mean, what's that, 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
That's 6 weeks' work, yeah.
And obviously a percentage of those will subscribe. Do you want to tell us what percentage subscribe? Or what do you need that to be? Or would you hope that
I had a target. So I had some voluntary redundancy money, and that was basically meant I could pay the mortgage and the nursery fees, and have a very long-suffering partner who was willing to put up with that, willing or didn't have much of an option. And I had 2 points really after year 1 and year 2 where I'd have to press the eject button and go and get a job elsewhere. I hit the year 1 target after 4 weeks, and I'm about to hit the year 2 target after 2 months.
Which is amazing.
And so I think I can kind of confidently say I'm obviously going to be too coy and too British to tell you how many people are paying.
Yes.
But the good thing is enough are paying that with the money I've currently got, I can afford to do this and hire freelancers and expand at a sustainable pace.
Because that's obviously there's a lot of worry when you start a new business. And it is a new business. From the money side as well as doing the job. So it's great that at least the money is starting to sort itself out.
The money is starting to sort itself out, but without sounding too much like a sort of worthy reporter, genuinely the most pleasing bit has been the stories I've managed to write, which sounds so cheesy that if someone had given me that quote as a media reporter, I'd have laughed at them. But I'm sincere. Honestly, whether it's been patients being overcharged for using wheelchairs in London hospitals, or it's been, of all things, an explainer on why the phone signals in London was followed up by just about every national outlet. There's been stories on the TfL cyber attack that no one else is reporting. And yes, I am very obviously London-centric if you're listening to this outside of the capital, but it's a model that I actually think that the nationals should really back away from some of the London coverage. I didn't grow up in London, and I always got a bit fed up with the amount of coverage that London got from the national papers. And when I live here now, what I realise is it's sort of too much for most people, but it's also not in depth enough if you actually live here. So it falls between two stools a bit. So what I'm trying to do is basically do in-depth, handful pieces a week that really tell you 1 or 2 big issues about London, what's going on behind the scenes, and break some news. And so far, people are really amazingly buying into it.
So I was reading some of your tweets, and you talked about a journalist who registered so they could get the full article, ripped it off for a title, and then unsubscribed.
I mean, that's all's fair in love and journalism. That's fine, that no law was broken. But I did laugh at the the ethics of sort of taking content from one paywalled publication and putting it behind a major outlet with a lot of resources paywalled thing without and that's all fine. You're allowed to do that, but it was the failure to link back when I asked, say, my tiny little outlet could do a favor.
And did that go to the journalist or did it go to the boss?
I don't want to make too big a deal out of it. It's rewrites and lifting.
But quite a lot of traditional newspapers now, sort of the journalism side of it is a big part of their business model.
And this is exactly what I am against. The Guardian was great in the sense that they didn't force you to do that, but almost every other outlet is just get something up as fast as possible, especially in the local press where I looked at the Evening Standard's Twitter feed on the way in, and the top story is, what is the new Pokemon game that is out now? And that's just written for Google. That's nothing to do with London. Now, that's fine. Their play is get as many clicks as possible and try and maximize the pennies that will come from weird adverts at the end for, your gut health. Click here now if you're over 75 and need to reclaim your insurance. That's the model they're going to, and that's the model that's doomed, because Google's going to take the links out from the top of results. AI is going to eat the really easy what time is strictly on tonight traffic, and all that's going to be left, and people will read it if it's properly done. They will read actual stuff that's relevant to them, but that is expensive to do. And I don't love having things paywalled. I'd obviously much prefer to have everyone able to read it for free. But I think there is an acceptance if you really signpost. If you want the really good stuff, you're going to have to cough up. People do. You've
gone for quite a tough, hard paywall on it. Because you don't get a lot for free if you're not after your sort of your trial, do you?
You get. I'm mixing it up a bit, and you should get sort of enough to tell you a few things that are going on in the city. But if you want the big in-depth reported stuff, then yes, you've either got to pay for a free trial or sign up for a year. And at the moment, there's still the launch offer running, which is about 60 quid for a year. And I'm not saying that's I've got to really work hard to justify people paying that much to me, and luckily enough have that I can. It's a model that I'm not sure will work everywhere, but there's enough people in London who are interested in it, and a lot of people who sign up saying, I just really want to support someone trying something. So there's a lot of faith being put in me, which is weighing very heavily on my shoulders, because I've got to make sure these people are happy. They've given over money they've worked hard to earn.
Does it make you think more about your audience than you have in the past?
Yeah, and particularly what really appeals to certain segments of the audience. So I did... I had the launch party last night, and I enjoyed the fact that I did a big piece on a queer venue, the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club, and the sort of financial shenanigans behind the scenes. And it was quite funny. Every gay man in that room came up to me and went, my mate's WhatsApp group was alive with that one. It was like, so, if you're in the queer community, that got forwarded round. Or if I've done a piece on some transport policy, then the transport policy nerds will forward that. So you do end up slightly segmenting, going, you really want to make the one piece that everyone in a particular niche wants to read about this week.
My wife very much enjoyed the foxes. That was her.
Exactly, yeah. So if you're into bin collections in London, then you can read about bin collections in London. I think the trick is not to try and do too much, and I'm unashamedly very focused on news and breaking news rather than sort of writing and sort of features.
I think, Chloe, it's interesting. Everyone's got to sort of look again at maybe what they do and what they did in the past. You see a lot of audio production companies now kind of becoming publishers themselves, whether that's running big podcasts or looking after the ad money. Are you seeing that with your members, that they're becoming the sort of the broadcaster as well as the creator of content?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some really nice examples actually of different companies doing that. I think the first one is Rusty Quill, who I am an enormous fan of, because I think they have broken every rule in the rule book in terms of how they monetize content, the network that they are, how they operate as a company.
It's sort of like a genre fiction audio company. Yeah.
I mean, so they've been going by for about 10 years, run by Hannah and Alex. And they do self-published podcast, audio drama, which is traditionally a very kind of high-cost commissioned, impossible to monetize. They have always been self-published. You hear Alex is the CEO, you hear he's very kind of creative, his voice on kind of some of the intros. It's audio drama horror, which is amazing. And they have, with no investment over the last 10 years, built up this incredible network that is really successful. Their kind of commercial news around it is incredible. They also publish other kind of podcasts in the same genre. They work with Acast on that. And I just think, if you're thinking about IP exploitation, look at Rusty Quill. They're a production company. They're a publisher of other podcasts. I found out the other week they've got a perfume line from the Magnus archives, which is incredible. They're, talking about London Centric and the kind of faith that people put in you. I think the success of Rusty Quill is based on how much they connect with their audience and how much people love them. They said that they went to a wedding of some of their fans. They've got tattoos. I love it. It's such a brilliant story. And they obviously work as a publisher.
Jim, I'm going to look forward to the perfume aftershave spin-off of
the merch line,
London Centric. Right, just enough time for the quiz. Let's see how much our guests have been paying attention to the media news this week. And in aid of London Centric launching, this week it's entitled Anywhere But London. You wouldn't believe it, but there's actually news outside of London as well. I'm going to give you a place, and you tell me where the UK-based media story happened there, what it was. Best of three, buzz in with your names if you know the answer. So Jim, you will say.
Jim.
And Chloe, you will say.
Chloe.
Let's play Anywhere But London. Right, question number one. What did major UK broadcasters agree to this week in Baku, Azerbaijan?
Jim, I'll go. Shall I have a go?
Chloe.
They agreed to a cross-industry climate pledge.
Yes.
Sort of vaguely on the right. Could you clarify?
I feel like we've had a lot of those, haven't we?
Yeah.
So a reporting system for reporting carbon use across programmes. BBC, Channel 4, Channel 5, ITV, Sky and UK TV have done it. It's going to be coordinated by BAFTA Albert.
Yeah.
Their sort of the green scheme. Which is a pretty good thing. I think it's pretty much UK based rather than the world, but good place to start.
TV based as well.
Yeah.
I think I love that it's cross industry actually. One of the things that we try and do at Audio UK is a lot of cross industry stuff because everything's in a sort of silo otherwise, isn't it? Dependent on ownership.
And they've sort of added it into a lot of like post-production documentation.
Right.
So they've tried to sort of connect it to the things that production companies do anyway. Right, question number two. Which part of England did the BBC claim this week will receive an extra £282 million?
Jim. Is it the north?
It is not the north.
Is it the east?
It is not the east. Chloe,
it's like
can
a
you
geography lesson.
Put him out of his misery?
The West Midlands?
It is.
Maybe.
I'm more specific.
Digbeth? I can't even say it. Digbeth, sorry.
So the net gains despite the closure of the long-running Doctors and the move from the mailbox. Question number three. Which country of the UK was revealed this week to be dominated by London-headquartered TV indies?
Go on, Jim.
Come on, Jim.
I'm gonna go Scotland.
It is Scotland. Do you know why?
I presume everyone opens an office up there and then mysteriously makes shows that they had commissioned anyway. Isn't Traitors made by Studio Lambert Scotland? I'm not even.
So according to Broadcast, only 5 of the top 15 Scottish producers are headquartered in the country. I saw it described as brass plating. So in other words, you sort of have a little sign that says, we are based here. Is that the sort of story that London Centric would cover if it was a London, somebody doing the same thing in London?
I can't work out what's our editorial line. Are we pro-London taking over the rest of the country again? I mean, ironically, I'm really, really pro like devolution and investment outside of London and think it's a very positive thing. There's also the reality, though, that if the market's really tough, the skills required to bid to get money from a decreasing pool of cash, you're not going to have as much chance as when there are hours and hours of sort of daytime tape that just needed recording. So I guess in some ways, is it better to have some jobs up there, or is it better that the sort of the capital and the ownership is Scottish? I don't know.
Yeah, Chloe, are indies just opening little satellite offices to do well out of some regional cash?
I mean, I think that story is specifically TV rather than audio. I actually went up to Glasgow last week to see all of our Scottish contingent of members, of which there are many. And I am proud to say that the majority of them are kind of, Scottish based. Interestingly, a lot of their work isn't commissioned. It will be branded podcasts, self-published, kind of working in that way. I think it's a really interesting for me, and I think there is a huge difference between a London company opening an office in Scotland that employs people from Scotland, puts the money back into the economy, grows the economy, versus the brass plating, which is literally someone from London, flying up to Scotland once a week to record a thing. And I think the key is, where's the money going? Is it coming back down to London, or is it staying up in Scotland? I think ideally you want those Scottish indies to thrive, and as I say, the majority of our indies there are Scottish indies. But I think, to Jim's point, there has to be the work and there has to be the money, and that's what needs expanding on.
Well, congratulations, Chloe. You win with 2 points there. You get to find out whether there's any regional money for us to move the media club to. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Jim. Just remind people again how people can subscribe to London Centric.
Just Google or use your favourite search engine to search for London Centric, and you'll find it there.
And Chloe, how can people keep up with you and your work?
Just LinkedIn's the best way. So Chloe Straw and Audio UK are on there as well.
Excellent. And thanks to Jane Ostler for earlier as well. We'll see you soon. And thanks to you for listening and watching. Remember, you can sign up to the newsletter at themediaclub.com. It's free, and you'll get an update from us every week, including links to all the stories that we cover. You can also drop us an email, hello@themediaclub.com, if you've got a story or something that we should know about. My name is Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. I'll see you next week.